Welcome back to Candid Talks about Sex for Saints, where we get candid about love, sex, wellness, and relationships. Just so you know, I am Tammy, a wife, mother, best-selling author, your favorite intimacy and relationship coach, the host of this fantabulous podcast where we're going to promote sex, but still keep it God, y'all. And I got some questions for you. Have you ever wished that someone had taught you more about sex from a faith-filled perspective? Or have you ever had questions no one answered? Or felt like if you knew then what you know now, you might have made decisions a little different. Well, let me tell you, you are not alone. This podcast is dedicated to just that. We're going to fill in the gaps, break some silence, and help you grow in godly intimacy without shame. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about
We're talking about communication because communication, y'all, let me tell you, it can either be lubrication or it could be wet complications. Okay. For anyone who struggles with communication, you definitely know exactly what it is that I mean. So let's be real. The way that we talk to each other, or the way that y'all talk to each other or don't, it seems to set the tone for the way things are going to happen within the relationship. It sets the tone for whether or not you're going to have that emotional connection, or whether or not you're just going to be communicating on a very surface level. Okay. Now, you want to make sure that when you are in marriages, you're in relationships, whatever the case may be, that you are having communications where you're able to dive deeper in. And if you're not doing that, then you're setting the tone for your communication to already fizzle, and that emotional intimacy to already drift away before it even has a proper chance to lay a foundation. And so this episode is going to be raw. It's going to be real. I want to be able to give you some tools that you can be able to use that are practical, that you would be able to set the tone and begin engaging in communication immediately from the time you log off of this episode. You'll be able to use these tools within your relationship. So thank you again for tuning in. If you're here for the second day of this series, I appreciate you coming back, because it means that you heard something last week that interested you enough to come back this week, and I appreciate that. It means I'm doing something right. You ain't throw the ball in the towel with me yet. Okay, so listen, story time. A couple of weeks ago, my husband, he went into the food store, and as he's in the store, he has our boys, 5 and 6 years old, and he's shopping in the aisle. I'm practically with him because I'm on FaceTime. He calls me on FaceTime. So he's going through the aisles, he's picking things up, putting them in the cart, and he lands into the juice aisle. Now, for anyone who knows any of my boys, one of them is like obsessed. He loves apple juice. Apple juice is his thing. We sometimes have to turn it off and be like, "Now you need some water because you're just drinking way too much apple juice." But he don't want no other juice but apple juice. And so my husband's in the juice aisle, and he's asking him, "What juice do you want?" Which immediately perked my ears, because everybody knows he drinks apple juice. And so he says, "Apple juice. I want apple juice." Right? And so my husband points to another juice in the aisle, and he's like, "You don't want this one?" He says, "No, I want apple juice." And it's almost to me as if he's trying to pressure him to drink something else. And I immediately come out and say, "Well, what you got against apple juice? Like, I don't know what you got against apple juice. Why are you always trying to get him to drink something different? He likes apple juice." And I'm just going in on the phone, not even thinking about what I'm saying. I'm just like, "Why are you getting him apple juice? Why are you trying to get him something different when you know he drinks apple juice?" And so you know what he did? He picks up the phone and he's like, "You know what?" And he just hangs up. So I'm just like, "What? Wait, hold on. I'm talking, and no, you did not just hang up the phone on me." The disrespect, right? I immediately start going in. I am livid. If livid could be a person, let me tell you, I was I was so mad. I was so mad. And you know what else made me even more mad? I kept calling. I called him back. He didn't pick up. I called him back again. He did not pick up. I think I called him back about 5 times. This man would not pick up the phone. And it was making me so mad. I think I was even more mad than I was before, because I'm thinking the disrespect. I am the wife. How are you hanging up on your wife? You're just showing me how much respect. And I'm going in my head, y'all. This is me talking to myself. I'm questioning the marriage because he done hung up the phone, right? Right. And so finally, he calls me back. I'm a little bit more calm. What I realized is later on, because he called me back from the store. He called me back when they were checking out. He had already shopped and bought all the stuff. He was in line in the checkout. He's like, I'm not calling you no more while I'm going through these aisles because you just tripping, right? So he's checking out. He calls me back, and I'm just quiet at this point. Like, I'm not even saying a word. I'm just on the phone, and I hear them going beep, beep, as they're scanning the products and paying for it, right? And so he gets in the car, and we're talking, and we get home. And so what I realized is that he wasn't hanging up on me at all. I am over here tripping over the fact that he hung up the phone on me. But when I had a moment to sit back and process what was happening, what I realized was that I was being reactive to a situation that I should have not been to, right? I was the one creating the disconnect. I was the one turning myself off because I was being reactive. And he was de-escalating the situation quietly because we were in a public, he was in a public place. I was on the phone. I was making a big argument in a store where he was surrounded by a bunch of people. And so when I started going in on the phone, people around began to zone into him. And it was embarrassing for me on the other side of the phone to be screaming about some apple juice when all you're trying to do is trying to get him to get something different because he drinks apple juice so much. And so people probably were looking at him crazy, like, who is this woman on the phone, right? And so he's embarrassed probably at this point. And so he's like, nah, I'm just going to hang up the phone because it's just too much. I'm doing too much. I was doing the most, right? And so I had to sit with that. I had to apologize, and I had to realize that communication, it isn't about being right. It's about being understood. So where was the disconnect? Because sometimes communication could be understood if you would just calm down, if you would just take the time to understand what's happening in the scenario. For me, I was reactive. I didn't even take the time to think about, oh, wait, he might just be trying to get him to drink something differently. It went immediately to, why are you trying to do this, when he was trying to do the best that he could to get him to switch things up because he felt like he was drinking the same thing consistently for so long. Not a big deal. He's doing something good. Like, why? What is even the big deal of him getting something different? I was the one being dramatic, right? I was dramatic, and I can admit that. I can admit that because, the situation is over, and I had to sit with that. I had to learn from that, and I had to understand that a little bit differently, because the reason one of the things that we struggled with in our relationship was having poor communication, not having the ability to basically talk it out. He communicates differently. I communicate differently. We had to figure out a way to be able to connect. And as you can see by the story, there's still some things there. Like, we still struggle with communication. But the main point, what I wanted to get you to understand, is that poor communication creates a disconnect. It creates a disconnect, and not just that, it's a complete turnoff. Because even though I was the one wrong, I was turning myself off. And one thing about women, when they are turned off in a situation, they turn everything off. They're not even wanting to do anything. Like, they want to keep their legs closed. They want to, go in their corner. They want to just be mad. They might go through a moment, but they're not going to enjoy the moment. It's going to be dry. It's going to be difficult. It's going to feel like sandpaper if they're engaging in any type of sexual activity at all, because they have already turned themselves off because of something they felt went wrong, some poor communication that was happening. And so what happens when you're not communicating properly? Well, if you're not communicating properly, then you're going to feel dismissed. You're going to feel unheard. You're going to feel like you're not being valued, or the things that matter to you is not being valued. And so let me give you some examples, because this is like some of me and my husband, some of our conversations used to go like this. Hey babe, how's your day? It was good. Okay. What was good about it? I feel like it was almost like you had to dig and dig and dig. And it's just like, you don't want to work so hard at trying to communicate. It's like talking to children, right? When I ask my boys, how is school? How is school? It was good. Y'all, if you have children, you understand this 100%, because children will never really tell you, oh, my day at school was fine. We did this puzzle. We worked on this project. We went outside on the playground. I had so much fun at recess. I got to play with Emily and we went on the swing. They're not going to say all that. When you ask them about school, they're going to be like, yeah, it was good. Okay, well, what was good about it? I don't know. So you did nothing all day? We did some stuff. They don't give you any information. And so you kind of got to force it out of them. And so when you are communicating with your spouse, you don't want to feel the same way. You don't want to feel like you're having to dig. You want the communication to just flow. Like they have to be open and easy to talk to so that you can communicate with them with other things. And if they're not receptive, or if they're not communicating with you on the very basic of the basics of level, then why would you want to dive in to talk about anything deep, right? Communication is important because it opens up the door for emotional intimacy. It might seem small, but when you're not communicating, it chips away the little pieces of whatever emotional connection can be built. And here's the truth: you cannot build real intimacy if there is no communication. There has to be some form of engagement. There has to be some form of dialogue. There has to be something that's going on. Otherwise, you are going to remain in a state where you're feeling unheard, where you're feeling like you're not being seen, where you're feeling like there's no value in the relationship. Now, I wanted to talk about a stat because this one is very interesting to me. The American Psychological Association says that poor communication is cited as three, one of the top three reasons why people divorce. In fact, they said 65% of couples named that the leading cause of disconnect was not communicating led to emotional disconnect. And that's a very real thing. That's a very real thing. So I want to be able to give you some tools to be able to take and leave so that you can begin to build on some of that communication. Because what ends up happening is if you and your spouse can come to a medium where you guys can agree and communicate about certain things, then every time you conversate, the conversations are going to get a little bit deeper. And when you become a little bit more deeper in conversation, you begin to start opening up about things that's really on your heart, things that you wouldn't say yesterday, you would be able to say today. And so the first tool I want you to think about is slowing down and really seeing each other, right? This sounds very simple, but instead of reacting, pause. Imagine if I would have just paused in that situation with my husband. If I would have just said, if I would have just paused when he pointed out another drink, if I would have paused, then I would have really been able to see what he was doing, which was just trying to get him to find something else to drink other than apple juice. That's it. There would have been no big deal. There would have been no blow ups. It would have been something so simple, but it turned into something that was a complete disconnect for us, right? And, luckily for me, he understood what he was doing, de-escalating the situation. But he called me back immediately because he understood he could have handled that situation differently, which is why he called me back before he even left the store. But he called me when he was in the checkout lane because he didn't want to go through the back and forth with me, picking on everything that he was picking up in the aisle, which I get, right? I get that now. But you have to also know your partner, know your spouse. He was giving me time to calm down because he understood what he was doing. It just took me a second to catch it. And that was me not being disciplined in that moment. If I would have just paused and thought about it, then I would have been able to understand the situation a little bit more. I could have asked something like, "Is there something that I'm missing here?" I would have been able to see, hey, wait a minute. He's just doing this differently. When you get to that space where you are actively slowing down and having the ability to see each other, then you can practice reflective listening. This is the when I hear you say this, what I'm hearing you say is, right? If they say something like, I want him to drink fruit punch, what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to change the what I heard was you're trying to get him to change something it is that he likes. But what he was really saying was, I'm just trying to get him to drink something different. we could have gone through that completely differently, right? We could have had an opportunity to clarify rather than make assumptions, which was what created the disconnect in the first place, right? Another tool that I would like to recommend is to do weekly check-ins. Check-ins are so important because check-ins allow you an opportunity to go deeper than the surface conversations. This is where you can probably grab a timer. I sell timers. They're 5-minute timers, and you can grab a timer, and in the timers, you can just set it to, like, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and just sit down and have a list of questions that you can discuss in those moments, where you can find out, like, hey, how are we doing emotionally, right? You'd ask him, how am I doing emotionally? Do you feel heard by me? Is there anything that I missed this week? Is there anything that I could have done more of? Is there something that I could have done better? This is not a space to be critical. It's not to criticize what has been done or what you feel is happening. This is a space where you are opening up for full vulnerability without the criticism. There shouldn't be any defensiveness. You always want to compliment someone first, right? If your spouse is doing something that you don't like, I don't know, if they are not washing dishes after they eat, like if you have an agreement and whoever cooks wash dishes, or whoever wash dishes cooks, right? um they might not have washed the dishes that day, and you might want to say, why didn't you wash the dishes? Don't come in with criticism or being critical or anything like that. Come in with, you did a great job with whatever it was you did today. Is it okay if you could get the dishes for me? Right? It's in the ask. It's in the it's in the not what you say, but how you say it. And so when you sit down and you have these mental conversations with your spouse, it's always going to be it's not what you say, it's how you say it, because you want to make sure that that space that you create stays vulnerable, that it stays um, a safe space for you and your spouse to be able to communicate the issues that you have the issues that you have going on without the defense. So you want to make sure of that. And once you get to, having these consistent conversations, what also builds communication is putting in the time, putting in the work to spend time with each other. You and your spouse need to be connecting in more ways than just conversation, in order to build that emotional intimacy. This means that, you don't stop dating. This means that you don't stop flirting. This means that you don't stop foreplay. You just do what you do, get what you want, and roll over. It's going to create tension, and you don't want your spouse to feel like they are an object. You want them to feel like they are loved. You want them to feel like they are secured. And so you have to be intentional about creating the space, for them to be able to want to be intimate, to be able to create that space so that you can dive in a little bit more. They would want to communicate more. They'll want to spend more time. They'll want to do a whole lot more when you are taking the time and creating a space that makes them feel, like they are being pursued, right? They're going to open up the communication when that happens. The communication, it breeds lubrication. And if you're not dating, if you're not going out, if you're not hanging out, if you're not exploring, if you're not doing all the things, then it's going to create dry complications. And that is something that you absolutely do not want. So what I would want you to do is, pursue do a challenge. Do a 3-day challenge where you are sending flirty text messages, where you are writing love notes and leaving them around the house in places that they would least expect, right? When they go to put on their shoe, before they put it on, they see a little love note on their shoelace, that they are able to read. Like, do little cute things, subtle things, and make it a challenge. Do a 3-day challenge where you are opening up the door to communicate some things, in a way that you have not done before. And plan a date night. One of the things that I always say is so important without the pressure of even engaging in any kind of sex or anything at all, make sure that you are scheduling regular date nights with your spouse. When I tell you, it is important to be able to segregate yourself from everything it is that you have going on, because everybody is busy. Everybody has things going on. Some people are trying to elevate. Some people are getting lost in kids. Some people are dealing with family, church, life, struggles, health. All kind of things are going on. If you are not being intentional about creating spaces where you and your spouse can zone out and get away, then you're not going to communicate. You're not going to have those moments where you can be vulnerable, and things will get lost in the process. And so I wanted to make sure that, in the same way that God pursues you, you and your spouse should be pursuing each other. He's gentle, he's consistent, and he is intentional. Marriage is supposed to reflect that. You want to make sure that your marriage is reflecting God. When you stop pursuing, when you stop communicating, especially emotionally, you are breaking more than a connection. You are breaking that reflection of the covenant, right? So when you connect emotionally, it is amazing how quickly the physical will follow. So I just wanted to leave you with that. So thank you again for tuning in. Today's episode, Marry Sex Mondays. We want to make sure that the communication that you have produces lubricant and not complications. You're not wrong for being turned off, but let's be real. It's okay to have conversations. It's okay to ask why. So thank you again for tuning in. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, enjoy your day.